It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
What's going on, all my spooky people? Welcome back to another episode of Slashers in Sync. I am, of course, the host, MJ, and I am joined by the lovely Marvelous, who was missing last week. How are you?
I know, I'm sorry. I'm good. Better now.
Yeah?
No. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
Okay.
Hatchet review wasn't the same.
I'm sorry, I really was dying. Like, genuinely.
I feel like people probably noticed that too, because like on my own, the episode was like barely like 27 minutes. Like, you are like the life, and I may be the host, but you're like the life and discussion of this podcast.
Honestly, I just told MJ, I think it's because I ask you a lot of questions and I dissect the details a little bit more than what you do.
Yeah.
And that usually initiates a lot more conversations between the two of us.
Yeah.
I have a tendency shut up. I have a tendency of like rambling. So there's also that fills in the space that is time. That is time, yeah.
Yeah.
But I did miss being on the podcast. It felt a little weird.
Well, real quick, do you want to just give your quick thoughts on Hatchet? You don't have to like go too in depth, but just like what you think of the film.
I guess to sum it up in like less than 4 sentences. It's a good film. It's a cult classic. For sure. The practical effects and the kills were definitely setting the bar at that day and age. I can definitely see where Art got his inspiration on some of his kills.
I didn't really want to say that in an episode, but like I feel like us watching Terrifier made us go like, okay, like this movie isn't like too crazy, but at the same time, like lots of blood, bro. Like,
a lot of blood.
Very gore.
A lot of blood. And all in all, I like the lore behind it too. Like both in the first one and the second one, because I know the second one goes further into detail of the lore that is Victor Crowley, but the lore in just the first one alone was enough for me to just kind of sit back and be like, all right, well, maybe I don't have to go through the entire Louisiana Bayou area.
No, yeah,
swamp area by myself. Not just because of the gators, but something else out there that's even worse.
So what's interesting about Hatchet 2 is the fact that Tony Todd, who plays Reverend Zombie, had like a cameo role, like maybe
in the first one.
Yeah, like did I say role? Like row?
He had a cameo role in the first one for sure.
And here he's actually probably the second main character after Danielle Harris.
Yeah, so, second main introduced, or at least like long-term character, if you will. Because, I mean, the movie kind of opens up, right where the first one left off, which is just essentially like a reshoot of the whole scene with the swamp, which you and I both mentioned. Actually, I think you started it first with our second rewatches. It almost was like a callback to the whole Jason scene.
Just like in reverse, because like in
Camp Crystal Lake.
Friday the 13th, Jason comes up from the water and pulls, I believe her name was Alice, into the water.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, I believe the actress's name back then was Amara, but now Danielle Harris, she's in the water, and then she reaches up, but then Crowley pulls her up. So it's kind of like a reverse of that scene, which I thought was kind of cool. I don't know if that was on Adam Green's head when he
was doing
this, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I guess you kind of touched base on another big aspect of the film, which is Danielle Harris actually picks up the role of Mary Beth. I don't know the previous actress's name. It seems that you do.
I believe it's Amara something, but I talked about it in the first episode revolving around Hatchet, is that Danielle Harris was actually picked for the role first.
Yes.
But he didn't want to make it seem like it was, hey, I'm just bringing in like a bunch of old actors and actresses, because Kane Hodder, who plays Victor Crowley, is also one of the guys who plays Jason.
Yeah.
Back to back. So he didn't want to make it seem like he's just gathering
a whole bunch of old heads from the horror films of like the 80s. Which I understand.
It ended up being to where I guess Amara wasn't okay with the film. I don't know, maybe because of the gore or just the
Either that or he
script.
wanted to step away for
Wanted to
whatever
step
reason.
away, and then Danielle Harris again. The spot opened up, so he went and brought her back in. And
Yeah.
and I feel like I can understand the sentiment for movie one, but Danielle Harris just fits the role of Mary Beth so well. Like, and I don't want to take anything away from Amara. She was a really good.
It was a smooth transition.
Yes.
It was a very smooth transition, not just in the actress's facial features and their features altogether, body type as well, but the energy that they carried with Mary Beth. I feel like Omara definitely carried more of like the stoic version of Mary Beth very well in the first film, while in the second and third portion we kind of get to see a more raw version of Mary Beth because of her loss.
Yeah.
So I feel like each actress portrayed Mary Beth the necessary way that she needed to be portrayed for each film. But I mean, either way, both of them did a very good job of making us empathize and like really connect with Mary Beth. At least me.
Yeah. Mary Beth makes it out the swamp and she is saved by Jack Cracker.
Of all people.
Yeah, after she fights off Crowley. Now, Jack Cracker is also a character that was introduced in movie one, which, by the way, fun fact, I believe it was made note in the trivia section that every person that worked on the original film, all the cast and crew is back in this movie.
Yep.
And I think that was one of the conditions that Adam Green had when it came to him doing a sequel of this film.
Yep.
He wanted to have everybody that was a part of the team
At least
back
still
here
alive.
again. Yeah. And in the notes, I can't believe you wrote this, but during a conversation with Jack,
Because Jack picks up Danielle's character, Mary Beth, and takes him straight to his whole cute little cabin and is trying to figure out how this tiny little girl is all distressed swimming around in a swamp that's gator infested and is in the
Yeah.
area that he's calling the Honey Island Swamp, which is
Yes.
the area where the Crowley family lived. And after some questions, Mary Beth kind of reveals that she was there because of a whole boat tour that wasn't really an illegal boat tour, essentially, and how everybody ended up dead and how she's come across like Victor Crowley. But in the first film, they kind of established that Jack Cracker, I guess Cracker Jack, how they said in the beginning of the first film, he's notorious for drinking his pee.
yeah.
And I kind of made the connection the second rewatch through when Mary Beth is, laying out exactly what's happened to her family, to the group that she's with. Cracker Jack's in a corner just pissing in a plastic bottle and then ends up handing it to Mary Beth and says, "Here you go. It's nice and warm."
Yeah,
She nearly drinks it.
I thought it was just like an old bottle of piss,
Nope.
but no, yeah, nice
It's
and warm.
it's a fresh one.
Yeah.
I don't know if he peed that much or it's like 2 different sessions back to back, but either way, man, it's fucking disgusting.
She almost drinks it, bro.
She had like a close fucking call until I think Cracker Jack asks her like what her father's name was, and then he doesn't hear it all too well or asks her to repeat it again, and she does, and then that's whenever the bottle is completely forgotten. Thank God.
So, even though Jack Cracker is a good guy, he saved Mary Beth, he becomes hostile when he figures out that her name is Mary Beth Dunstan, the daughter of Samson Dunstan. And I believe it's kind of made note of that Samson Dunstan is kind of I don't want to say like a famous alligator
notorious.
hunter, but people know him around the swamp. And I guess that makes sense, small town folk.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but everybody knows him.
At least whenever it comes to the hunting community.
Hunting community, yeah.
He's very well known. And the loss of his wife is also very well known amongst the community as well.
After Mary Beth tries to understand why her dad is linked to Crowley, but just ends up leaving because of Jack Cracker, he literally pulls, what is it, like a rifle on her? Or is it a shotgun?
A shotgun.
He pulls a shotgun on her.
Yeah, just keeps telling her to leave. And like, girl's not budging until he finally loads up the shotgun, points at her, and like, I think fingers on the trigger, ready to go, safety's off, where she finally leaves.
Yeah. I think I made the joke that she had just left the very first time he told her to, that he probably would have lived. But
yeah. But once she leaves, that's where Crowley kind of makes his way to Jack.
Yeah, his little shed area.
I don't know. Crowley kind of goes ham, but Cracker keeps saying like, I didn't do nothing, like I didn't help her, I didn't know, like it doesn't count if I didn't know, as if trying to rationalize everything that happened.
Yeah.
And I picked up during the second rewatch of this film that anytime that we hear Crowley yell out before he shows up, he's not moaning, he's yelling daddy.
Yeah.
So you hear that before you see Cracker Jack being killed. Sorry, brain flatline for a second there. And then once Cracker Jack is killed, the opening credits roll, and then...
Do you not want to go into how he was killed?
You can definitely talk about it.
You can say it. I want to hear you. I've been saying it for the past week.
So Crowley ends up sticking his hand inside Cracker Jack's gut, pulls out his largest, or one of his intestines. I don't know whether it's large or small.
Show's nasty.
Jack keeps running to the point that I guess the intestines can no longer come out. And Crowley ends up yanking Jack to the point that he falls to the ground, and then Crowley uses Jack's very own intestines to pull him close, and then wraps it around Jack's neck and decapitates him with his own intestines, which I think is very unrealistic, because the intestines would have either completely slipped out at this point, or they probably would have ripped before the decapitation. But who might have said anything?
You didn't say it the way we should say it. Decapitation by intestines.
That's how he's been saying.
When Mary Beth makes it to the city and pretty much just goes straight to Reverend Zombie, who is played by Tony Todd.
Yep.
Which, rest in peace.
I know.
That sucks, man. And she tries to understand what role her father had with Crowley. That's all that's in her mind right now. She doesn't care who she has to go to ask about it, but that's where it's at. And Zombie then, after some hesitation, and finally understanding that Mary Beth is the daughter of Samson, and also finding out that his boat and I guess one of his tour guides is missing, explains the whole situation that played out.
Yep.
How Mary Beth's father, her uncle, and a friend all were the accomplices for setting the Crowley house on fire and causing Victor to die at his father's hands. So, as I explained in the first film, the backstory of Victor Crowley is that he was bullied quite often, and 3 kids particularly went to his house on Halloween night, set it on fire just to fuck with him, and then when his dad came home, he tried to break the door with a hatchet, but instead hit his son and killed him, and then he is forced to relive that night over and over again.
Yep.
So I believe they call him a repeater, right? That's the ghost term they use.
Reverend Zombie tells Mary Beth that essentially Victor Crowley's a repeater. He can never find peace. He will keep repeating the same night that he died, and nothing will essentially save him. He'll roam the end of his days trying to find closure for something that he'll never find closure for.
But why don't you go ahead and get into the full story, because Reverend Zombie doesn't stop there. He ends up explaining exactly who Mr. Crowley was married to, the affair, and just what happened the day that Crowley was born to the swamp. Yeah,
so essentially, Zombie tells Mary Beth, hey, this is the whole story that comes with Crowley. It's not just the folklore or the tales that you've heard. The Crowley name itself wasn't something to shun or shake your head at. It was just a husband and wife who lived together, where the wife was severely ill and the husband was trying to provide. The husband brought forth a caretaker, and as the wife continued to get more and more sick, because I think she had some form of stomach cancer, the husband started to bond a closer relationship with the caretaker, to the point that they actually started to have their own affair.
Yeah.
And it's even painted in the film that you see the wife just laying on the couch or on some form of bed type structure, and Mr. Crowley and the caretaker are in the kitchen just having a grand old time.
A funny way to put it.
Yeah. But essentially, it's supposed to paint out that Father Crowley himself is very tormented by what's playing out, because he loves his wife, but his wife is dying. However, at the same time, he's finding the emotional support that he needs through the caretaker that is taking care of his wife. And here comes the day of the wife finally passing, just because of how ill she is. And Mr. Crowley and the caretaker think that Mrs. Crowley has finally passed. Wildest thing that I've seen in a long time, the two of them end up making out in front of Mrs. Crowley's just recently deceased body. Or so we thought, where all of a sudden she's on her 2 feet, has God knows what kind of strength, and starts reciting a curse.
Yeah.
And is cursing the mistress's soon-to-be-born child and the lineage that Crowley will carry once his original wife passes. Once the curse is fully said, the wife finally dies, and this is where the caretaker really starts to feel the effects of the curse.
Yeah.
Come the day of the caretaker giving birth, Victor Crowley is born, and the way that Reverend Zombie says it is that the mother passed after seeing Victor Crowley's face for the first time, because she died of, I think, shock or fear. And then the swamp was weeping due to the curse that was brought forth to this world.
Yeah.
So we get a full description of how Victor Crowley really came to be, and then also kind of a segue into what Zombie thinks is a remedy for the curse that is Victor Crowley.
At this point, they start arguing back and forth, and it eventually leads down to Mary Beth like trying to blackmail Zombie into just going back to the swamp so she can grab her family and give them a proper burial because she has nobody left. She already lost her mom.
Because I think the connection's made that Reverend Zombie had a hand to the boat tour that Sean was conducting in the first film.
That's why he was so worried about the tour guide. And
yeah,
we kind of find out why in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But at this point, Mary Beth leaves and Zombie was able to get the condition he wanted, which is you need to bring your uncle, and I'm going to bring with me a whole bunch of people because we're not only just going to go grab your family, we're going to go hunting tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the whole plan that he has, which is who he ends up telling his assistant, is that we're going to take back the swamp.
Yep.
And it's like kill 3 birds with 1 stone, essentially. So
the thing is, though, before Reverend Zombie fully puts this whole plan into action, he makes sure that Mary Beth brings back one particular person, and it's her uncle.
Yeah. She then ends up giving her uncle a call and then informs him of everything. And then we kind of skip over to Mary Beth's house to where I believe after she freshens up and cleans herself off after a fucking brutal night of murder, the uncle comes over and tries to convince Mary Beth that we need to go to the police and not to listen to somebody named Reverend Zombie. And at that point, she's able to kind of trick him. And then she goes and meets up with the group that Reverend Zombie and his assistant have gathered.
And then, ironically enough, Reverend Zombie's assistant looks a lot like Sean from the first film, which they kind of pull that same gag, I think, by saying that the two of them are twins, while Sean has a heavy Asian accent of sorts. The assistant, I forget his name, he is very Americanized and pretends to have a French accent for the sake of selling a lot of like voodoo tricks and so on and so forth.
Yes.
When the assistant finally gathers everybody and Reverend Zombie has the full meeting of the hunters and fishers, he tells the group that he's collected them all in order to go hunting for a very specific and very valuable prey, Victor Crowley. And by just name dropping him, only 1/4 of the crowd stay, if at most that. Reverend Zombie essentially then tells the remaining members that did stay that that there's going to be a huge reward for them getting the head of Victor Crowley, $500 for if they find the boat that went missing, and $5,000 for the head of Victor Crowley. There's one particular guy by the name of Pete that Reverend Zombie is very focused on making sure he stays and actually goes to the swamp. He's like a very mean-looking individual.
Yeah. It kind of makes sense why you would think he would want someone like that there, but there's more to it, which we'll get into later in the story.
Yeah, so once everybody is kind of all settled in, everybody that is willing to essentially sell their life away for about $5,000, Reverend Zombie gets their A-OK to go out and hit the swamp, I think, in the afternoon around 4 or 5. And so this way they can start the hunt. The next scene opens up with Reverend Zombie and Mary Beth on one boat with the majority of the hunters, and a smaller boat like right behind with 4 or 5 remaining people.
Yeah.
Mary Beth takes the time to actually call out Reverend Zombie and just says that, hey, he's deceiving the group, not really telling them exactly where they're headed, and that people have died, that, Sean has died. The assistant's brother is very much dead. Reverend Zombie does a very funny thing where he actually flips it back on Mary Beth and said that she could have easily broken the news to everybody around herself, that he doesn't need to be the one delivering all the news. She can step in and bring up the tragedies that have unfolded while she was on the swamp, especially last night.
Right.
So once they finally make it to Honey Island Swamp, it's dark-ish, like sunset, but Zombie takes the time to tell the group about the game plan, that everybody is supposed to stick together, but everybody ends up splitting up, ironically enough, and they want to make sure that they get to the loot ASAP. So I think there's like 4 or 5 groups in total. Some of them just pairs, others in like groups of 3 or 4. But essentially, as it gets darker, we start hearing Crowley yell out for his father before he makes his appearance and starts killing everybody in those small little micro groups until you get to the final group.
Yeah, so a couple of those groups are very interesting characters. One's, I think, like a mute, right?
Mm-hmm.
One's a dude who just likes to eat a lot.
My headcanon is that he's high.
Yes. Also, fun fact about him, he actually did that like song off the cuff about the chicken and biscuits and gravy.
Yeah.
That wasn't scripted. That was just him like singing along to it, like in his own head.
Oh, I love it.
On the boat. So, but yeah, everybody ends up splitting up, even though Mary Beth doesn't think it's a good idea. And the main group, I believe, is Justin, which is the assistant, the uncle, Pete, and then Reverend Zombie and Mary Beth. They all kind of go into one group. So that's the biggest one. And then the rest of them are split up in like the twos, like you said. And the kills are interesting in this film. Now, you and I have watched 1 and 2 twice already.
Yeah.
Do you think the kills in this movie surpass the ones? Because I think consistent-wise, they surpass them. But I don't think any kill in this movie, except for maybe a couple in the end, surpassed the old couple from movie 1. The one where he breaks the limbs off the old man and then rips the jaw off. Like, I don't think those kills get surpassed in this movie.
The
what do you
one
think?
kill that I would say is the mistress. The one who's on her hands and knees in the woods where Crowley comes in and I think grabs a hatchet and like starts slicing her from like her ass crack up to her rib cage. That one's a pretty gnarly kill. But other than that kill, I think it probably would be the duo. The one who talks a lot about food and the mute where they get sawed in half by a giant chainsaw.
Which, by the way, Kane Hodder, who was carrying that chainsaw, was over 120 pounds. Yeah.
Having to lift that up that high. Jeez Louise.
Also, another fun fact is, in this movie, I believe they used, maybe double the amount of, actually right here, 136 gallons of blood for this movie.
That makes sense with the amount of splatters that you see, especially with that kill that happens at the Crowley house. Like, that in and of itself uses a lot of blood to just splatter around. I mean, the kill of like the couple fucking in the woods, and then the other couple where they're sawed in half, and then you see how the people within Reverend Zombie's group are being picked off one by one, and how bloody their kills are. Like, it definitely makes sense.
As these people are getting killed, I guess we should get back on track. As these people are just getting killed, and the main group is reacting to hearing like the screams and Crowley, screaming out, "Dad!"
The only person who's getting excited is Reverend Zombie.
Yes, Justin just wants to find his brother Sean and just leave, but that's really not happening here. He even wants to like just go back to the boat, and then he asks for the keys, but Reverend Zombie doesn't trust him with the keys.
Yeah, he's just kind of like, "You're gonna leave me here. You should go."
He was always like, he was on point for a lot of stuff, Reverend Zombie, as far as like to his own benefit though. I didn't really like him as a person, but to his own benefit though, he's very smart with his shit. But they all kind of like trap themselves in the house, and they end up in the house because the brothers the brother and father had been moved from the shed.
Yeah.
The bodies anyway. So Mary Beth wants to check the house. They all end up getting locked in there because Crowley's coming closer and closer to them.
Yep.
And at this point, Rev Zombie finally makes his plan known to Justin that he's been trying to help Crowley find peace by having him kill 2 remaining people responsible for his death, Mary Beth's uncle and Pete, their friend. Since he had already killed Samson, that just leaves 2 more. Now, at this next scene, Justin and Mary Beth end up in a back room together because the uncle wants to lock them in there since, again, Crowley's coming closer and closer.
Yeah. Uncle's trying to really make sure Mary Beth stays alive.
Yes. And Justin does something kind of weird in this film that I till this day, I didn't really get it even by watching this second time, which is after Mary Beth finds out from Justin what Rev Zombie's plan is, she runs out and he sees something move in the trees that are like blended, or the grass or whatever that's blended into the house at this point because how old it is. And he locks the door and stays in there.
Yeah.
I didn't know why he did that. That was kind of weird, but
it could be out of fear.
Maybe I'm like misjudging the way that scene was shot. Maybe there was like a wall in between the grass there, so he thought that the noise was coming from the outside, so he thought if he locked the door, he'd be safe. But from the way it's shot, it looks like it's happening inside the room. So it's like, why would you lock yourself inside the room when you saw something move in there? You know? Like,
that's true.
But either way, this leads up to Justin getting killed. He ends up going into the closet, which almost led to like an outside of the house, and there was a bunch of spider webs and everything. And then they do the cool shot with like the flashlight turning on and off, and Crowley's behind him.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
And he ends up killing Justin in a horrible way, which alerts everybody because Justin is screaming for his life. And when the uncle finally makes it Justin to break through the door, Crowley just breaks right through it and knocks the uncle down, and he's down for the count. And this is where we get a fight between Crowley and Pete, one of the guys who killed him.
Yeah. This fight was a pretty interesting fight. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't think Pete would last as long as he did, but at the same time, considering his like build and his stature, he looks very similar to Crowley in some ways. And I guess
Pete, he did all his own stunts too. The actor for Pete,
he on some fucking crazy ass strength, dog. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, because Crowley's literally ripped people apart. So
yeah, and he could hold his own.
So seeing someone like hold him down was like,
and is not paranormal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was pretty dope. The fight scene was really nice. I mean, all in all, you kind of knew the end of it, which was going to be that Crowley was going to win, just because, I mean, it's the story, and you're very early off into the film.
Yeah.
Still. So when Crowley finally gets that one up that he needs, Pete ends up taking the fall, and you kind of see somebody who really carried his own for a minute there, just kind of easily crumble down just as quick. Which kind of goes to show that a curse really can, I guess in this universe, outsmart somebody who has the wits and the brains for whatever the reason may be.
I think around the time that Pete's getting killed, that's when Rev Zombie is like dragging Mary Beth like just out of the house to get her out of there and stuff like that. And the uncle tries to chase after him, but he ends up locking the uncle in there, and that's where we get the kill with the uncle. He tries to square up with Crowley, which is kind of funny. I'm not going to hold you.
I think right before Reverend Zombie starts pulling out Mary Beth and covering her mouth, like, he kind of reveals that this was his plan all along. He's been meaning to have Pete and Mary Beth's uncle be the people that Crowley gets to finally see for the last time in his own place, that Mary Beth's father, her father's brother, so meaning her uncle, and Pete were the trio that essentially lit up the Crowley's house. And that now Crowley could finally get his revenge and find his peace. And this way, Reverend Zombie could bring more boat tours or just have people come and see Crowley's ghost. Right. Like, whatever kind of profit he was going to make off of this new, like, spooky touristy spot, right? But, I mean, shit hit the fan.
Yeah. The uncle dies, and at this point, when they are outside and Rev Zombie thinks that Crowley's no more,
Yeah.
That's
and the
when
uncle dies in like a really brutal way, blood splattered around everywhere.
The whole like house is shaking, dude. It's kind of interesting. And you can tell, I guess, he's getting torn apart, literally.
Quite
like,
literally.
Yeah.
You hear flesh being torn into, yeah.
Once all that's done, Rev Zombie starts speaking to Mary Beth, and I think he says the plan again.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he said the plan there or if he just confirmed it quickly, but he actually recites the plan to her, like straight up again, like right to her face, and that's when she tells him that, like, wow, you're fucking stupid because that wasn't my uncle, essentially. And he freaks out, and she says that my uncle actually died of leukemia when I was 12. This is just like her dad's best friend. And yeah. So Crowley's back. He breaks through the door, and they do this interesting shot. And I said it the first time we watched Hatchet 2, and then I said it again. Reverend Zombie in this universe isn't like anything but just a guy who owns, right? Like just a big dude who owns basically a swamp touring business.
Essentially.
But yet they do this cool shot. And you see this a lot like in wrestling, like in WWE or like even in UFC. The way they do the shot is they have like Reverend Zombie and Crowley like walk from, they're off screen and then they walk on the screen right towards each other, about the same size, right? Like they do a lot of that in WWE to hype up people, or like, you know, when UFC fighters did the weigh-ins. And I keep making the joke, I could tell that they wanted the Candyman versus Victor Crowley visual, like, right? Because he had like the long, like the black, you know, the long pants. Like they wanted it to be like the Candyman versus Victor Crowley visual, which is funny because it's also Kane Hodder playing, you know, Victor Crowley, who's also Jason as well. So we get that cool shot, and he dies in a crazy way, man. Like he rips First, he rips him in half.
Yep.
And then he pulls his body out of his skin, right? And then he's actually alive, too, while the skin was ripped off.
It's almost like a one full swoop of just him getting skinned. It's a very clean skinning, if you will.
After he gets skinned, which I actually think that kill is probably better than the one with the girl.
It always takes away my breath.
But at the same time, you reacted to the girl's death a lot worse than I did.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh, I felt that. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I think that kill is actually worse than the girl kill in the woods. But Mary Beth sneaks up behind Crowley, starts hitting him with the hatchet.
Yeah.
Starts hitting him with the hatchet, and then she goes and grabs a shotgun when his arm starts twitching, blows his head off, and right when that happens, credits roll. Hatchet 2, what'd you think?
I liked it. It was a good continuation. It carried on the same energy. The blood was still there. The gore was still there. I feel like Danielle Harris still carried on the type of vibe that Adam Green wanted Hatchet to have.
Once she fixed her hair up in the scene where they gather and she did the Mary Beth hairstyle, I was like, I can see why like
they picked
Amara was like picked after her. Like they look a lot alike. Yeah,
they do. Like I said, very similar features, but all in all, it's pretty good. I feel like it definitely captures the 2010s like horror scene before Paranormal Activity and all those like found footage type shots. And I liked it. Practical effects were very much still there. The amount of blood used, you could tell that there was a lot that was put in the film for that.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell that the people who were working on the story were very much passionate about it because there was no stone left unturned, but at the same time, it didn't feel like it was excessive, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I also
everything made sense.
Also, like, and this bleeds into part 3, which we'll review soon. I like how every film just kind of follows into each other. Like it picks up right where it left off. Very Friday the 13th-ish. Yeah. And I think that's, which again, Kane Hodder, like the connections are there. So I do think that's really dope that they did that. It makes the whole franchise just seem very seamless. We have still yet to see the 4th one though, which is like a legacy sequel, if you will. So
yeah, because it's not a requel. I think even in the poster that was released says it's not a requel, it's not a sequel, it's a continuation.
Yeah, so I can't wait to get in there. Maybe we'll watch it this weekend. But Anyways, go ahead and let us know what y'all thought about Hatchet 2, and make sure to follow us on Spotify as well. And don't forget to comment down below any suggestions for horror movies that you guys have, because we have seen quite a few, but we haven't seen everyone. So
No, we can even do like a whole new franchise. I won't say we're gonna do multiple movies per episode, but we can definitely like give our thoughts on it. Franchise, depending on
maybe
how
a
many
little bit more
movies it
akin
has.
to like the Nightmare on Elm Street, where we talk about what we like and dislike. 'Cause
Yeah.
going plot point by plot point was kind of tough, and I think you guys could tell by the end of our Halloween franchise that
Not even that, and you guys telling, just more so like these movies have been out for a while, so I'm sure people have learned the plot to a certain degree. One, and two, just more so in the sense of like it's time consuming to hear about something that you can easily read on Wikipedia and so on and so forth. So
yeah. But anyways, as I said, like this and make sure to follow us on Spotify, and we will talk to you guys next time.
see ya.